Hello, everybody. I'm Keith Bryant, and welcome to another episode of the Keeping Up with Keith interview series. Today, we have a great guest who's been a mentor to me. He has been everything: a producer, executive producer, assistant news director, and now a recruiter, a senior recruiter. So, today, we are keeping up with Richard Washington, who is a senior recruiter at CBS News and Stations. Hello, Richard.
Hey, thanks for having me, Keith. It's my pleasure.
Yes, no, thank you so much. I mean, I already listed like you have a long career in our journalism industry. So, how did you get the journalism bug? How did you become a producer and how did you get to your role today?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. So, in high school, I studied a lot of physics and calculus and things like that. And I knew I didn't want to go into something math and science related, IT related, anything like that. I was always a decent writer and won some awards in high school. And I was super into sports. So, I thought I wanted to be the next Stuart Scott coming out of school. And my mom at the time, she was working for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in Maryland, and her boss went to Syracuse and said they had a really good school for sports and a lot of alums from Mike Tirico to Bob Costas. So I applied there, early decision, not knowing the implications of that, and got in by the grace of God, and went to Syracuse and was very intimidated. Folks saying they watched Tom Brokaw and things like that during the summer, and I was playing Madden on the Sega Genesis and PlayStation, so I wasn't on the same news pedigree as my peers, but went there, soon learned that sports wasn't for me because there weren't a lot of Stephen A. Smiths and folks that were all knowing or could focus on one subject matter like basketball or football back then. You had to know all sports, and I wasn't into all sports like hockey and golf and tennis and others. I shifted into the news world, was doing a lot of general assignment reporting up to my junior year. If you can believe it now, because I don't have much hair left. I used to have locks. And there was definitely a stigma about you're not going to be able to get a job or you're going to have to cut your hair and all these other things. And I did cut my
Yeah.
hair, but my reel wasn't great. And, I didn't want to put in the work in the summer to get my reel to where it wanted to be. And I remember junior year into senior year, this is going to show my age and how old I am, Keith, but there was a flyer up for people to sign up for classes next year. And it was like RTN 565, Advanced Producing with a guy named Dow Smith, who's wrote a book that many people have used in the past called Power Producing. And it said something to the effect of, do you want a job when you graduate? Do you want to make more than $30,000 a year? Do you want to start in a higher market than Glendive, Montana? Then come take my advanced producing class. And I took that, and it was half. One day a week we were in class, and one day a week we did an internship. I did an internship at Channel 9 in Syracuse, and with the goal of producing once we left. You would produce one newscast. Unfortunately for me, the guy who I was training under called out sick the day I was supposed to produce it, and they didn't trust me to produce it. I didn't have a reel coming out of school, but I had the foundation. I thought I was a decent writer, and I went back home to the Maryland, D.C. area and was just applying for a lot of jobs. Got a job as a production assistant in News Channel 8 in Arlington, Virginia. And my job was to simply change the traffic cameras for the live broadcast, and that consisted of me punching in numbers on a phone that corresponded with the live traffic camera. Then once the newscast was over, I would become like a tape producer. Back in my day, Keith, I'm much older than you are. Back in my day, to get
Yeah.
file, you would have to go to a tape library in the station and check out file of President Trump or file of airplanes at Reagan National Airport. I would take those tapes to an editor. They would edit things. I would download things from, the file sharing service, whether that was News Channel or ABC News One or Fox News Edge, give them to the editors. They would edit video, and then I would arrange the tapes in order according to the rundown, and those would be played in order because you were playing off a tape and not off of a server. So that's how old I am. But I did that for 9 months. While I was there, and this is what I'll encourage young folks, always get your key card, right? Once you get in the building, you can do anything. So like the producer didn't want to do this cut in. I was like, let me handle that. They didn't want to write these stories. Let me do that. And that helped me gain a writing repertoire, put some things on tape. And then I think because of Syracuse, one day I just get a phone call out of the blue from a guy named Frank Jones. He was an EP at the time at NBC
Hmm.
12 in Richmond. He had an opening, 5 a.m. producer. I jumped at the chance. I remember my dad drove me down that day after work and I interviewed and we drove right home. Ended up getting that job. And then I went from Richmond to producing in Charlotte at WBTV, producing at WAGA, Fox 5 in Atlanta, producing at Fox 5 in DC. Then I got my first EP job, EP at WBAL in Baltimore, EP at NBC 10 in Philadelphia. Then I became an assistant news director back in Charlotte at WCNC, the NBC station there. Then I became a news director at Fox 61 in Hartford. And now I've been recruiting for CBS News and Stations for 2 years, producers, executive producers, assistant news directors, and news directors. So long journey. Sorry for that elongated answer, but that's my story.
So the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because, producing has changed since you have been in college, since I have been in college, since I even have entered the industry.
Yeah.
Producing has changed. And I think the most common question I get from producers, since I'm in this producer group, what are news directors or hiring managers looking for a producer reel? How long should it be? What should a producer reel include?
Yeah. So there's no exact science to it, right? Back in my day, you would just send an entire show. And if a news director is smart, they're going to ask for you to send last night's show, right? Because I want to know what you can do on those so-called slow news days. Nothing's going on. There might be mistakes in the show, all that. I want to just see what you did yesterday, right? Can you showcase on a slow news day? Can you make your show interesting and invigorating and appeal to the senses, even on those days where there's not a big breaking news story, right? That's what I look for. However, I know that the business has evolved. Reels have involved. So I think you want to show your ability to own a big breaking news story, right? Or own the top story or big story in your market. That comes from cold opens, that comes from urgency, that comes from setups and showcasing and more. I think you want to show your ability to go deeper when necessary and create some synergy with all the tools that we have now, digital tools and more. Not just my old boss used to call it a moron tease, like not you can find more on this website about this. No, here's a digital element that you didn't see in our newscast that you can get on our website exclusively, and here's why you need to go see it. Things like that. I want to see your ability to write. I want to see good tease writing. I want to see good setups. I want to see a good clever line. I want to see you write to video. These things are important. I don't get too caught up on wallpaper video and stuff like that, but I want you to have a rationale and a reason for the things that you do. I don't want you to do something fly for the sake of doing it. I've seen people put maps into big monitors and zoom into it, and I can barely see the map, right? So like have a purpose for what you do. Is it to engage the eyes? Is it to do these things? That's what I want to see. So usually we see montages of great cold opens, right? That could be on tape. That could be getting creative with the stand-up tease, things like that. It could be voiced over. It could be you got people in different locations and you're showcasing that, or it could be getting right to it because you got some urgency and some breaking news. I want to see a great setup with some purpose and reasons for doing it, whether it's a map to add some context and perspective, whether it's putting up a 5 box to show the magnitude of what we're doing and that we have all angles covered, whether it is to put two reporters on two distinct angles and tell you why this person is on this and why this person is on that. And you're going to see all this in the first 5 minutes of this show. Things like that, I think are important. And then there's a little bit of whiz bang and creativity too, right? Are you walking the line with your anchor pointing? Are you pulling the reporter out of something? Are you showcasing some good video in a different way? Are you using a jib camera? All these things. I like to see a little bit of that, but I think at the bare minimum, you need to have a strong A block in the least and some good tease writing and some good showcasing in cold opens.
Gotcha. Having those elements could get you to the top of the pack of the resume pile.
It could, along with what your resume shows, like what kind of shows you're doing, where you've worked, things like that. But, I think the biggest thing, yeah, that'll get you the interview, but during the interview is where we're really going to find out what you're about.
Gotcha. And since you're recruiting for, I guess, thousands of people or hundreds,
Yeah.
To fill multiple positions from the network to the local level, what are these the news directors, the assistant news directors, or the EPs are talking to you when you're trying to look for producing candidates? what
Yeah.
are the top three skills?
I'll give you hard skills and soft skills. So soft skills, you gotta have
Hmm.
some emotional intelligence. This is a stressful business. It can be a thankless business, and being able to keep your emotions in check. Where there are some grumpy gooses in newsrooms, where their emotions can fly in the control room or in a meeting or just working with your peers on an early evening show. I think that's important. I think a passion for the business is important at this time. I was in the business 20 years ago where we had a graphics operator, audio operator, TV, prompter operator, and more all in the studio, right? Now you might have two people in the studio, right? So we're firmly doing more with less. So a passion for this business, knowing your why in the journalism business, I think is important because it can be a very rewarding career where you can affect change and more, and it can be very fruitful in that sense. And I think there's not a greater time or a need for great journalism and great journalists, but coming into that for the right reasons and knowing that you'll have to grind a little bit. You might have to work a few Christmases. You might have to work a few weekend mornings or 4 a.m. shifts and things like that. But you'll get there, right? And it's a sacrifice like any job as well. So just know that. And I think you also have to be a problem solver. There's many a times where there are more stories than crews available. There are times where you have to make an executive decision. It might not always be the right decision, but at least you made a decision, right? And there's value in that, and there's leadership in that. And I think some leadership skills too, whether you are the news director at your college TV station, whether you're the editor in chief at your college newspaper, you are the program director at your radio station. I think those skills transfer, but not everyone has to be a leader. There's a cacophony of personalities in the newsroom. You have leaders. You have the quiet workhorsemen who get things done. You have the logisticians and more, and all those factors combined make a great team. Hard skills,
Yes.
I think you have to have I think you have to know how to work the system, whatever it is, whether it's EMPS, iNews, you're
Hmm.
cutting on Avid or Adobe Premiere Pro, you have to master the technical aspect of that with some speed, I think, right? I think you have to have good news judgment. I think that's important. I think you have to be calm under pressure as a producer. But what's paramount to me for a producer is the ability to write. And I think that translates into also, like when I was a news director, I used to have reporters who couldn't give me a pitch under a minute. And at the end of it, I still don't know what your story is. And you know what? That translated into the story they gave me on the air, right? If somebody can't give you a lead or a tag in 15 seconds, then they don't know the story. They don't know what the sell is. I remember old boss said, this editorial meeting, it's the sales meeting, right? You are selling your story. Have you ever been in an editorial meeting, you see two reporters pitch the same thing, but one person gets it and the other doesn't? It's because of how they're selling it. It's because of their track record in the newsroom. It's their ability to get things done. You have to be reliable, and your team has to have trust in you to get that story done. I think some reliability is important as well. And, I like to see someone that goes the extra mile, right? That doesn't have to be asked to do things. That I don't have to pull teeth to have you work the Super Bowl if we're in Philadelphia and the Eagles are going to it, right? That's an automatic sometimes. But I know it's not like that in the business. But those are the people that get rewarded. Those are the people that move up. And those are the people that are going to make more money and do better things in this business because I see your work ethic. I see who you are and I see your passion. The people that are volunteering to do a special project, the people that are volunteering to field produce, the people that are said, I'm going to do a cold open today and I didn't get asked to do it, even though we normally just start with 3 headlines, but I'm going to do a track cold open because I want better for my show and I want better for myself. Those are the producers who become EPs and news directors and move up.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I want to ask, what is something that may trigger you not to consider them? Mistakes that some producer candidates make during an interview.
Yeah, so there are some red flags that make me cautious. I don't know if that would eliminate them from the pool, but cautious, right? If you've
Yeah.
only been, you're right out of school, you've only been producing for 5 months and then you're applying for a job in a bigger market, that's a red flag to me, right? If you are putting a title on your resume that I know you're not doing, that's a red flag for me. If you say you're a producer and then I look at your bullet points and it reads like a writer or an AP, and then when I talk to you and you say you don't have a show or something like that and you rotate, or you say I fill in as the EP and I'm acting as the EP, even though you have an EP, but your producer title, then those are red flags to me too. I think if someone can't articulate what they've done and they're just cut and pasting from a job description for the job that they ended up getting, that shows that you don't know what you've done as a producer and you don't have any qualitative or quantitative things to put on your resume to show me what kind of producer you are. If it's just write both sides, write headlines for the show and things like that, that's not going to get me excited. It might get you an interview, but it's not going to get me excited. And those things translate in an interview, right? If you can't tell me a special project you've worked on, a show that you're proud of, some big breaking news that you've owned, things like that, then it kind of shows me what kind of producer I'm dealing with and likely not the kind that I'm looking for. During the interview, I've had people do things that raise my eyebrows, and it might not get you eliminated, but it raised my, like I've had people say, I don't like that question. You know, I've had people that can't follow simple instructions. I'll say, walk me through your resume and start with your most recent stop. And they'll start with their first job and then go into the opposite order. I will say, just walk me through your professional work history. You don't have to mention internships or anything like that. I see that on your resume. And they'll start talking about internships and their college radio station. So just following simple instructions sometimes shows me that you won't be able to follow them in the workplace either if we can't even do it for this interview. That's not an end all be all, Keith. There's
Yeah.
a bunch of different things that factor into an interview, a resume, and more. But those are some of the things that I see on a daily basis as a recruiter.
Gotcha. And there's been recent think pieces, and I say in the last couple of weeks, even years, about the state of producing, that some companies are having a hard time finding good producers. Is that still, I guess, the sentiment today? Are companies still having a hard time trying to recruit producers?
Yeah, I mean, speaking from the standpoint of CBS,
Yeah.
where we have owned and operated stations, we're in some decent markets and pay decently. So I wouldn't say it's much of a problem with us, but just imagine if you are a company in a market like 100 and up, where your bread and butter used to be students right out of school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now there are markets where you used to have one or two, you used to have to have one or two markets under your belt before you could even get to that market that are hiring people right out of school now. So you go to those folks in those market 100s and lower, then where are they going to get folks from? Because these bigger markets that can pay more are stealing what used to be their bread and butter and their go-to producers, right? So I think that's what makes it tougher nowadays, combined with, I think the pandemic showed us that you can have a little work-life balance. You can do this from home, and folks got a taste of that, and they're like, why do I want to come back to a newsroom and come into work at 11 p.m. on a Friday to put together a Saturday morning newscast? You know, it's already tough in that regard. And then, but that's been since the test of time. You know, you're
Yes.
going to be jealous of your peers who have jobs where they get off holidays. News is a 24/7 business. It's akin to a hospital. It's always open, right? And now we're expanding on digital and streaming platforms and more, right? And don't necessarily have as many bodies as we used to because there's been erosion in ratings and bottom
Mm-hmm.
lines and more because there's just more to choose from streaming to YouTube, people cutting the cord and more. So you have all these things happening at once that explains kind of the state of the business and journalism and producing. There are still good producers out there. There are people that still want to be in the business. J schools are still thriving. And I will say to anyone who wants to be a producer, you will always be employed because good producers are hard to find. And if you're good at what you do, we'll find you.
Okay, awesome. And you bring up a good point about smaller markets having a tough time recruiting because their entry-level producer could go to a mid-size or even a top market, especially with how, I mean, being a product of the NBC internship program and seeing how CBS and ABC run their internships, they run their internships like, and they're paid like AP positions, sort of,
Yeah.
and then those students could get a job at a lower market within that company that they have to start. Should they have the grind of going to a Glendive, Montana, or Bakersfield, or could it just like, hey, started this awesome internship at the station, and can I get hired as an AP here and
Yeah.
start from there?
I mean, I say your goal is your goal, right? And
Yes.
there's a lot of bad advice out there from professors or people who got out of the business and never really stayed in it for a long time. Or folks, there's a lot of bad advice out there. You don't have to start in Alaska. You don't have to start. You can start wherever you want to start, however you want to start. And I
Hmm.
say aim for the sky, and where you land is where you land, right? Because who am I to say that you have to follow my journey or my path, right? Starting in top 10 markets as APs or writers and working their way up. There are people that starting at the network level as associates and working their way up to EPs and higher. So your journey is your journey. So I don't, I think there's value sometimes, like say on the reporting side.
Yes.
I'm just talking in generalities here. Let's say you're a reporter and your first job is like for 30K, right? And you get your second job and it's for like 65K. Then you want to make a move to a top 10 market and you might want to command 75 to six figures, right? It's easier to do that at 65. But let's say you're in your first market at 30K and that top 10 market comes calling because they just laid off or forced into retirement three reporters who are making 175 to 200K, right? And they
Yeah.
offer you 70 and you're like, I'm doubling my salary and I'm in a top 10 market, sign me up. Little does that person know that they may have had more bargaining power if they went to a medium market like a Raleigh, a Charlotte, a Milwaukee, or something where you might be making 70 there. And then when you get to the top 10, you can command 90 or higher or something like that. So sometimes there's value in that medium market as a reporter or an anchor or something like that, because sometimes these top 10s, not saying us, but I've
Hmm.
seen it, a top 10 or a dominant station or something, some place that everybody wants to work for. They're just happy they got an offer and they think, oh, me? They want me? And I'm coming from Roanoke, Virginia. I'm coming from Norfolk, Virginia, or something like that, and I can get to DC. But little do you know, when you get there, then you find out everybody's making more than me, and then you're demanding these high raises, and you're not going to get it. You're going to get a 2% raise or something like that for the rest of your career, and it's going to take you 20 years to get to what you could have been making. You know what I mean? So I'd say watch that. Salaries are important, and they make your money on the front end. This isn't the NFL where you can hold out in training camp and get a new deal, right? You need to kind of
Yeah.
get your money on the front end.
Yes. And also, I want to mention about a skill that's also overlooked is networking your way into the top or the desired station you want to go to. Because, for me, I started in Bakersfield, but, I had an internship at NBC and we have a mutual friend or mentor and helped me get me, when I jumped from Bakersfield to NBC Connecticut
Right?
and then to, San Diego, to NBC San Diego, having that networking. But for producers who may not, who don't have that network to rely on,
Yeah.
what can they do to crack into a O&O like CBS?
Yeah, I'd say know who the key players are. I think conventions are a great place to rub shoulders with the stakeholders and the decision makers at a lot of different stations and companies. If you can attend, like, talking about NBCU or NBCU Academy or Storytellers Summit, something like that, or go to some of the panels that we have and things like that at CBS. That's a great way to get your card out there, your reel out there, get some resume reviews, get some real reviews and more. So it can be expensive, but it's an investment in yourself, right? So I think that's one way. LinkedIn is a playground. There was no LinkedIn when I was coming out of school. I wish there was, where you can showcase your reels, showcase your work. You can
Mm-hmm.
message people. You can ask for coffee chats and meet with someone over LinkedIn. You can ask, can I visit the station and just, attend the afternoon meeting or something like that. That's another way, right? Or when you're in someone's town, can I stop by? It's easy to find out someone's email address. There's so many free tools out here to do that. I think that's important too. And I think the biggest thing is building a relationship before you need something, Keith. Like
Mm-hmm.
building a relationship before you need a job when you're a year or two out and you talk about this is a destination market for me, or I know what your station's doing. You show that you've done some research, you know about this station, this company, the key players there, what they stand for, what their brand is, the kind of stories they do, the accolades they've had, and more. And I want to be a part of that one day. That's important because I can't tell you how often I will post a job and the hiring manager knows who they want for that job before we even post it, right? That
Okay.
puts some folks at disadvantages, right? Because oftentimes folks have built a rapport with someone already, or they've worked with someone in another market and they know that what this person's work ethic is, their pedigree. It's kind of like when coaches take different players with them, right? Or different coaches with them. Same thing happens in the news business. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case, but a news director is going to have a feel for the kind of candidate they want to bring in here, right? So that's important.
No, exactly. And I think, you talk about the type of feel of candidate, because I think when I got to LA, I kind of realized that each show is different and not, it's not producer one fits all for
Sure.
each show. Because I think an EP explained to me one day, it could be a spread. Because there can be a very grumpy person, a grumpy goose. You say he's a great producer, fantastic producer, but a grumpy goose. Or we have someone who may not be as strong as that producer, but he's like, he or she is like a great person to be around, easy to work with and stuff. And so the spread is the skill set is very spread out
Yeah,
throughout the newsroom. And
indeed.
I guess beforehand, I guess what can the aspiring producer candidate do to make sure they, I guess, fill that mold, or it's just like they just have to adapt to what the interview process is?
Yeah, I think being a good newsroom citizen is paramount, right? I think I'm a firm believer I can teach anyone how to produce, but I can't teach you how to be a good person. I can't teach you how to help out your fellow producer when he or she is drowning right before the show starts. I can't teach you how to pick up someone's shift because a loved one died and they have to rush out of the newsroom. I can't teach you how to not have an emotional reaction to that grumpy goose who is really grinding your gears and picking at you today. Things like that, right? I think being a good newsroom citizen is paramount. But also being good at your job, trying new things, being innovative,
Mm-hmm.
being creative, and when the lights are on, come into play, right? There are going to be
Yeah.
certain moments when the lights are on. Breaking news, a big weather event, God forbid a tragedy where you're going wall to wall, something like that. Or oftentimes during crisis. I tell people all the time the biggest step for me and the hardest hurdle is moving from producer to EP, right? You come in as a producer at a news station, you're a good writer, you keep the show on time, you communicate with your anchors in the ear, you handle some breaking news, you get a pat on the back and you're in there. You're contributing to story meetings and stuff like that. You're in there. As an EP, the report card is different. Oftentimes you're copy editing, you're making unpopular decisions that people don't agree with. And that report card comes during a crisis where there is no right answer. You're picking the lesser of two evils. And that can
Mm.
bring some eyeballs your way where people are second guessing you or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's hard to gain um, your footing there. You might have a anchor who goes over your head to the producer when you want them coming to you. And the only way to do that is to build a rapport and build trust and keep shining when the lights are on, right? And often the lights are on during a big breaking news story, when something breaks down, when something goes wrong, when there's an outburst and you have to handle it, things like that.
Okay, gotcha. And so also for, let's say I have a producer, they're mid-career or they're in the market of their choice, but they're feeling pretty stagnant and they want to do something a little bit more or innovate. What advice would you give to that producer right now at their current station?
Yeah, I would say first talk to your manager about, hey, this is on my heart. These are some of the things that I want to do, and here's a plan for me to do them without taking away from my regular duties as a producer. Right? I know Black History Month is on the way, Hispanic Heritage Month, Pride, AAPI Heritage Month, or something like that. Or I know this annual event that we do, whether it's a tree lighting, holiday lighting, an annual parade, an annual race that you sponsor, something like that. I want to be a part of that. I want to contribute. I want to learn from the person who puts that event on every year, something like that. So raise your hand for that kind of stuff. If you see an opportunity to do something special like a digital only special or a special or something on a topical news event, that's another way to do those kind of things. It could be, hey, I know you got some vacation coming up, or you're going to be out of the office on Thanksgiving or Christmas. I'm not going home. You think I could act as EP for that day or produce and be the EP and assign the reporters or something like that? So it's little things like that that can help fill your cup. But it comes from having a plan, raising your hand, making those intentions known either in one-on-ones, your yearly review, or just impromptu in the moment. Things like that help. And then if you're not getting it there, then go find some place that values you where you can do those kind of things in a newsroom that values that kind of work and is not just grinding people with daily newscasts.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna pivot to layoffs because it's been happening in our industry. There's been media headlines across the board, and and for I guess for producers during this time that with layoff, is this a good time to look for jobs or not right now since we're going through these layoffs and the budgets? Yes, people are looking at companies are looking at their budgets
Yeah.
for next year. Where with this conversation, where does producers stand in the job market right now?
Yeah, I mean, every company is different. I think no company is immune from the ratings erosion that we've seen in the business. And that's not necessarily because there are bad products out there. It's just people have more options, right? More people are cutting the
Hmm.
cord. More people are relying on YouTube and social media and things like that for their news. And that just has the byproduct, it has an effect on viewership for us, right? And that can translate into dollar signs. And that's a byproduct of that. But I would say if you're happy where you are, then don't be in a rush to find something new at a time like this, right? Because there's lots of consolidation, and sometimes consolidation means different things for different companies, right? There is a lot of political season has an effect on dollars as well, right? This is not a presidential year. Oftentimes, an odd year is a soft year in terms of revenue for most stations. If you don't have midterms or a governor's race or a Senate race or a presidential race, which is the case in an odd year, so that affects your bottom line. And also, it's the end of the year, right? So Q4 is oftentimes where we're going to see budgets for the next year happen, and you'll see the hiring probably pick up in the new year and more things will be green lit. But you can read the trades and figure out kind of the state of the business or look at your company and see what it's doing to
Hmm.
survive, whether it's merging with another company or buying another company or creating a strategy to get more stations or something like that. But there are things that come with that oftentimes, especially if we're talking about two companies combining and they both own stations in the same market. There's a bunch of different ways where that can go. And you just have to be mindful of that way as you're navigating the job market.
Gotcha. And what should producers do if they're navigating, like, how should they keep their resume up to date, their skills? Like, what do they need to navigate any unforeseen changes? Like, what would you tell them right now?
Yeah. So I think this is very much a multi-skill platform world. So if you don't know a little bit about streaming and digital and how to program a stream, how to produce for a stream, how to get a stream up, knowing how to write a web article, things like that, whether you're on the assignment desk, a producer, or a reporter, I think you need those skills nowadays. If you don't know how to edit, I think you need those skills nowadays. It used to be the days of a station just having an editor. There are some, right? But that's more of an anomaly, an exception to the rule. So learn how to edit and then just know that you aren't just producing for linear anymore. You have to have synergy with your digital products and your stream on a daily basis every day and think about these things in the morning meeting. What are our digital extras? What kind of reels can we do? What can we save for the web or digital and more? Back in my day, when Twitter first came out in 2008 or something, we would be afraid to break things on Twitter. Those days are over, right? When you
Yes.
need to be able to break things on digital, you need to get up on the stream breaking news, even if you don't want to break into programming. And those who are know how to do these things and knows how that world works and how it can be synergistic with your current world that you're producing for, because you're not just producing for one screen anymore. That's how you stay relevant in this current producing world. Same thing for reporters.
Okay, gotcha. And then I want to talk about producers who may want to become EPs because I hear this line talked with producers. Because you're a good producer does not mean you can become a very good EP.
For sure.
Because it's a different skill set. Because
Mhm.
once you're in that role, you may be dealing with Susie from over there, Kyle from over that place, and it can. So if a producer wants to be an EP, what should they consider before they want to make that jump?
Everyone's not going to be your friend, right? So there's two trajectories for becoming an EP, and both are tough, right? You can be the hotshot producer at this station, and then you become an EP at a station where no one's familiar with your work, and then everybody's looking at you like, who's this guy giving me orders? And you might have a mutiny or a revolt on your hands, so that's tough. Or you could be the hotshot producer at this station, friends with everybody, the anchors love him or her, your peers love you, and then all of a sudden you're their boss. You're telling somebody you can't have off on Thanksgiving. You're telling somebody you gotta fill in for, or anchor, I need you out on the set 10 minutes early and stop getting to the set with 2 minutes and shuffle and put your mic on. Then nobody likes you, right? So I think you have to learn that not everyone's gonna like you, but you can gain respect. I think you have to learn how to deal with people, right? Because you're gonna have a lot of tough conversations. You're gonna have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. You're gonna have to learn when to deal with something in the moment, like cooler heads prevail, but make sure you deal with it because it will fester like a wound, right? You're going to have to learn how to make quick decisions, and you're also going to have to learn when it's time to take your time and bring everyone into the room and be more collaborative. You're going to have to learn when to
Mm-hmm.
escalate something, whether that's a personnel issue, whether that's a breaking news issue, whether that's we don't have enough crews and there's a big story going on, things like that. Know when to escalate something to your boss, because the worst thing you can do is try to handle something, think you got control of it, and it spirals and snowballs and you never pick up the phone and made a call. So that's important as well. You're gonna have to learn how to problem solve. And then you're just gonna have to learn how to do good journalism and figure out those nuggets that are gonna differentiate your competition. And I also say know your community. It's more than just coming to work every day. You know, I'll call out a guy who's been mentioned before in this conversation, where I remember he said to one of my nightside reporters, was driving me crazy. He said he's living here, but he's not living here. And what do you mean by that? He's like, comes into the nightside meeting, he pitches a story that we were on in the morning show or dayside, and he doesn't know it because he doesn't watch us. When you call him on his work phone, you can't reach him because he's turning his phone off when he goes home. When's the last time he walked into a diner and saw the competition up and asked the waitress, hey, why do you watch those guys? And why don't you give us a try? When's the last time he took a source out for coffee? When's the last time he went to the farmer's market and grab hand people? And the answer was never, 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 because he's living here, but he's not living here. So you got to live in your market. You got to know the players. You got to go to an urban league meeting. You might have to go to a community meeting and make it known that I'm here. I represent us, and I want to know your stories and showcase them on our air.
Okay, awesome. And so, does that take a step further if you want to become an A&D or a news director?
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are even higher. So I think in moving from an EP to an A&D, you have to learn to be accountable for all day parts, right? Where I've been a nightside EP my entire career, so I was laser focused on nightside. Then when I become an A&D, then you got to know what's going on with the morning show, how they create, make sure they're not doing things different from the early evening producers, and make sure they're not doing things differently from nightside. So you got to have your hand, one foot in the day to day and one hand foot in the bigger strategy, right? You have to work for an ND who's going to raise the curtain on some things that you might not be privy to, from budgets to contract negotiations to hiring to recruiting and things like that. And then in D, you're putting it all together. You know, you gotta know how to hire the right people. So when you're in meetings and tied up with your GM, that you know the newsroom's gonna run smoothly. Systems and protocols and how do we do things and what do we stand for, branding and execution and all those things. But learning how to work with other departments, from marketing to engineering to sales to promotions and more, production. All those things have to be in sync as an ND. So I might have got ahead of myself there, Keith.
Oh, that's good. And then I wanted to ask because, there's some producers who may want to just be a recruiter. I even myself, I thought about, oh man, I should be a recruiter. I feel like I'm good at finding talent. I like building talent for a company. How can people fall into that?
Yeah, because I kind of fell into it, right? With you, I was always recruiting in every management job I've ever been in. I've helped with hiring from producers to reporters, whether that's giving a name, making a referral, or doing the hiring process myself. And then as a news director, that became even more so when I was working for a different company where we had to post the job, do the interviews, write up the contracts, all of these things. So I was doing a lot of things that I do now, but just not on a full-time basis. So I left my job as a news director and didn't really, and I knew I was coming back to the city that I'm in now and didn't have it figured out, but knew I was coming back to the city without a job and someone. And this is why it's so important not to burn bridges, and it's important to be noticed within your company. Somebody who was in my old company became a director with CBS News and Stations, and and this is why it's important to be visible on LinkedIn. When I put that I'm leaving my job and I'm open to work and more, then the floodgates open, and she said that, what do you think about this opportunity? I had done this a lot anyway, and just, the only thing I miss, well, I miss the newsroom terribly, but I
Hmm.
can still hire people. I can give people their first jobs in certain markets, help them attain money that they may not have made before, give them management position that they may not have done before. The only thing is I can get them in the door, but I'm not fostering their growth like I would when I'm in the newsroom and we're working side by side and we can do one-on-ones, we can do show reviews, we can do all those things. I'm not doing that anymore, but I still feel like I'm making a difference and bringing some people into the company that may have gotten overlooked otherwise. So that is still fulfilling to me. But if you want to be a recruiter, I had people reach out to me all the time that are producers or EPs and say, next up, I think I want to do this. So it starts with that, right? So then if we ever have an opening, then I can say, hey, I remember talking to this person, or they messaged me on LinkedIn, or we had a Zoom chat, and here's what they've done. I think that's important. Any type of leadership workshops, anything like that you've done at your station, if you recruited at like a NABJ and NAHJ, stuff like that, I think that helps. And then I'd say it's just kind of connecting with those stations, the directors of talent acquisitions, those are senior recruiters, those VPs of talent acquisitions at all the different news companies, and just making your intentions known, saying this is what I've done in the business and this is what I think I'll be good at in the future. And if you ever have an opening, please look my way.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this conversation up. So I always ask everyone this same question for all the interviews I've done. So, Richard, what are you keeping up on?
I'm keeping up on everyone's rap list and discovering so much new music that I wasn't listening to before. I'll tell you, I just listened to this guy. It's kind of like this jazz R&B, and I love it. His name is Destin Conrad, and his album Whimsy. I love it. I listened to it on the way home as I was rushing to make this interview because I'm uh, big stickler on being on time. And that's not just for a Zoom interview, that's for an
Yeah.
editorial meeting, that's for my show, that's for an interview, what have you. I'm all about being on time. So that's what I'm keeping up with right now.
Okay, yeah, and I do need to check him out because he's nominated for a Grammy too. So for
Rightfully
best
so.
R&B album. So I have okay, so I have to check that out. Richard, where can people find you?
Social media is RW3TV and LinkedIn, Richard Washington III. That's the best place to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today. And guys, you can follow me on all my channels at Keeping Up with Keith. So again, thank you everyone and have happy holidays. See you next time.